Hello and welcome to my video about the 48-hour GMTK game jam, wherein I made a hectic 1 to 2 player game about wrangling blorbs into their pens. The window of time was 48 hours, and the theme was joined together. The theme for the GMTK Game Jam 2021 has been announced as Joined Together, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So it was brainstorming time. I didn't have very much time, of course, so it was at this point that I just had to throw things at the wall to see what sticks. My first idea was some kind of a platformer that allowed you to copy the properties of materials around you. You know, rock makes you sink, wood makes you float, but look out for fire. I actually really liked this idea. It was pretty neat, but I ended up going for the next and my final idea, where the player would control 2 characters and try to catch these small blob creatures in a loop. The more of them you catch, the higher your score. But if you let too many gather up, it turns into a monster, and that makes things harder for you as the player. Though later on, I would change directions a bit and end up with something more like soccer or football, depending on where you're from. I based the movement on some movement code explained in Heartbeast's video series Make an Action RPG in Godot 3.2. It was a pretty excellent video, so things were smooth and working well pretty quickly. With the movement taken care of, it was time to work on the next most important part of the game, the rope. Luckily, I had recently watched a video by Picster here on YouTube covering how to implement a rope system in Godot, so I had a pretty good general idea of how to make one for my game. After a bit of experimenting and trying to get the links of the rope to actually connect, the rope was working. Awesome! With the rope in, I could move on to having it follow the player and detect anything caught inside of the loop. Luckily, attaching the rope to the player was pretty easy. Just pin the ends of the rope to the 2 players the same way that the rope links are held together themselves. I put in a few placeholder objects to try catching with the rope, and things were looking good. The rope was attached, the tiny Godot heads were colliding nicely, and all was good in the world. So next, I was going to have to try and figure out this detection area thing. This is where I had the most trouble. To make the area detection work, I was going to use a Polygon 2D. And for that, I would need a polygon. Trying to get that polygon was not an easy task. I spent about 3 hours on trying to make this work right. And by the time I stopped to take a break, I had it sort of working. The polygon was showing on screen, but it would break all the time, which is not a good thing. I'm pretty sure the polygon would break down whenever the shape crossed over itself, and this was not good. I thought maybe I could have the rope links self-correct away from each other so that the shape wouldn't cross over itself, but that would not end up working out. I took a break to refresh my mind, some food, maybe a drink, some time to collect my thoughts, and then I went back to work and tried to have the ropes straighten themselves out like I mentioned earlier. Again, this did not work. I worked on it for about 45 minutes before I decided maybe the rope shouldn't be moving itself, trying to avoid itself. Maybe I should move on, find some other solution. Fantastically, after I fixed it so that the rope was no longer completely broken, I managed to find something on the internet. There was a question by Ronnie Person and an answer by P7F, which showed a function that could validate a polygon. I found a way to validate the polygon, and now that I can do that, I can chop off the start and end of the polygon until it's a valid shape, and have that be the shape, so that it doesn't just disappear into nowhere when one of the ropes crosses over the boundary where it's not supposed to be. It's something functional. We're gonna run with it. Now that I had player movement, a rope, and a collision polygon working, it was time to move on to the next main focus of the game, the blorb. For the first version of the blorb, I pretty much gave them gravity, and by that, I mean that blorbs are pulled toward other blorbs, kind of like planets. So more blorbs in one area, more force drawing other blorbs. They could also be cleared by closing a loop around them with the rope. Here's a bit of footage with a shadow to show where the collision polygon is. Pretty decent, works nicely. I think that's gonna be it for today. I've got to get to sleep. I took a bit of a break and now it's late and now I'm out of time here. I gotta get some rest. And with that taken care of, it was time for sleep. At this point, it's been 24 hours since the jam started, making this the halfway point. So far, we've got the characters moving, the rope is pretty much working, the blorbs are there, and they can be cleared with a loop of the rope. Most of the base necessities are in, but it still doesn't feel fun. It doesn't feel like a game. So today needs to be the day that I finish the rest of the game. I need to make it a game. So first, I'll focus on adding what is needed to make it fun, and then I will add art and polish. To get started on the gameplay, I added a basic score system, a basic play area to test things in, and a basic timer that runs on shader power. As a bit of a side note, I'm actually really happy whenever I manage to do things with shaders. They're weird, they're hard, and I'm pretty sure that they're really efficient. In this case, I have two sprites for the clock, one completed and one uncompleted, and I turn the pixels on the above clock transparent depending on their angle from the center of the sprite, and it works fantastically. Things were starting to feel a bit better at this point, but I still didn't feel like the project was fun yet. This is the point where I had this new, simpler idea. Rather than having a monster system, power-ups, score combos, why not just fling blorbs into the pen soccer style? That would be simpler, and it sounded like it could be actual fun. So I drew up a basic arena, made a nice clock for the timer, and added them into the game. Oh, and these cute little people. This one is a cowboy hat. Once I had a good idea of where this project was headed, I could quickly rework a few things to make them fit the new idea. The players got a shorter rope with more friction, the blorbs now would give points when put into the correct goal and take points when put into the wrong goal. To go along with this, I also got rid of the blorb gravity and instead made them move toward the goal of the opposite color. With that basic gameplay in place, now I wanted to add pretty much everything else. Text pop-ups for points, particles, a nicer spawning system, a main menu, and since not everybody uses the QWERTY keyboard, I also wanted to add in a control remap system. This actually went pretty smoothly. Well, I say that now, but I'm pretty sure I entered running out of time gotta work fast mode, and did way too much work without doing a git commit. This apparently took me a grand total of 6.5 hours. Lots and lots of work. Alright, it's about midnight, and I think I overdid it a little bit. I've added a system for remapping controls, pop-ups for when you score points, particles for when the blorbs are destroyed. I've added a spawning system, I've added the menus in general. I've added a lot of things, and I'm not sure that I remembered all of it to note down. So, all that's really left is the sound, and that's pretty much it. I don't have any data saving, so no high scores, no saving your remapped controls, but this is it. The end is in about 11 hours. I gotta make some sounds. Since I was running out of time, I decided to stay up a bit longer and see what I could do. And boy, did I end up with something beautiful. First, I recorded a melody. Then, back up to go with it. It still felt a bit empty, so I added some 3-note chords. A more constant sound. And finally, some bass. And we've got a full track. Speed it up a bit, and now I have something pretty decent which sounds on time and loops. Beautiful. With that done, all I had left was a bit of cleanup work and exporting to do in the morning before submission. I'm pretty sure this last stretch of time was spent implementing the sounds, implementing the music, and exporting the project. My submission was seriously close, but I ended up having everything done and submitted just 7 minutes before the deadline. Whew! What a crazy 48 hours. Then I finished up the itch page and made sure everything was pretty. With that all done and dusted, the game jam was finished. The project isn't perfect, of course. It doesn't clear the current score when hitting replay. It doesn't save your control settings. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have controller support. And, I'm sure there are lots of things that could be added to make this game better. But overall, I'm so proud of what I made in these 48 hours. It was an amazing event. Unfortunately, I did notice something in my project files that wasn't supposed to be there. I thought it was probably harmless, but I was a bit worried anyway, so I removed the files and re-exported the project to re-upload it. Also, unfortunately, as this was my first itch.io game jam, I didn't know that sometimes you aren't allowed to upload new files while the voting period is active. I think it's a toggleable setting for jam hosts that keeps people from updating their games when they aren't supposed to, which is pretty good for big ranked jams. This meant that after I deleted the files, unless I had left the jam, I couldn't upload the new builds until the voting period was over. But hey, at least I learned a few valuable lessons. Overall, I'm incredibly happy with how the project turned out. I think each one of my game jam games have been better than the one that came before, and this game is no exception. This was my first 48-hour game jam, and I love every stressed minute of it. I had fun, and I can't wait for GMTK 2022. I hope you enjoyed this video, and that you have a wonderful day. Bye!